Hey guys, Carla here, the founder and CEO of Ignite Your Learning. Today I'm going to be walking you through how to write an essay on Othello. And as with the other resources we create, when we look at an essay structure, it really it needs to be something that can work with any different question that you're given. And when I say that, you may be given a question, a specific question about like characters and ideas are usually the main sorts of questions. And then you can also get an extract question as well. So this will help you really bring together a structure that's going to address all the parts of the play and allow you to manipulate it based on the question that is asked of you. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off looking at the context of the play. So couple of quick things. You don't need to mention a lot about this, but it's just good to note. So to start with, it was, set during a particular conflict. So obviously we've got this scene of, backdrop of war that's going on. But really, like, the main parts of context that I think work really well, particularly in relation to relating to this to a modern audience, is to look at the characterization of Othello, because and very topical right now, given that there's lots of injustices emerging that potentially weren't necessarily as clearly seen before as they are now, such as emerging through Black Lives Matter movement, etc. But there's a lot of prejudice and a lot of characterization of Othello that again I think is very relevant for a modern era. So one of the things about Othello is that he was very stereotypical based on an account that this particular individual, Leo Africanus, gave of Africans' virtues and vices. You can mention him if you like, but really the key thing to remember is that he sort of considered that Africans were considered like physically strong, noble-minded, yet like mentally and emotionally flawed. So he felt like they were particularly subject to things like deceit and jealousy, and like irrational behavior. And that's definitely something that we see in Othello's character. Another thing that's really that kind of comes across quite a lot in the play is also this stereotype of men of color being sexually depraved. So we get especially when you look at it from Iago's perspective, he's sort of like, oh, I think he slept with my wife. When he goes and kind of dobs on Desdemona and Othello like eloping, he talks about how Othello is a black ram tupping Brabantio's white to you. So very like kind of depraved. Anyway, I'm going into examples, so I don't want to do that yet. But there are lots of examples of where this particular stereotype comes about. You've obviously got patriarchal values. So like women are expected to be basically submissive, and men are dominant. You do see that played around with a little bit. Shakespeare does that a lot. He takes typical roles of characters and then he sort of like experiments with them, usually for entertainment value. Everything goes back to like where it should be, so to speak, by the end. But in relation to women, yes, so she's expected to be submissive, even though, Emilia kind of challenges her husband, Desdemona challenges her father by, running off with another man that he hasn't necessarily approved of, etc. But like I said here, ultimately the typical roles of the play are restored by the end. Othello commits suicide after realizing that he is this, barbaric person who has been blinded and murdered his wife. The villain is slain, so he's out, and then the women are all subdued. So it's sort of like everything is sort of back to where it should be, so to speak. But of course, what we're looking at is how these particular roles are represented, and how that continues to be relevant today. Another thing I want to mention is that the play is structured through an Aristotelian tragedy, and this is actually really good to integrate into your structure because it follows a very linear path, which bodes very well for essay structures and your overall argument. So what I've done, I've just got a little link here to Aristotle's theory that you can watch, another recording I've done But long story short, you've got a hero. They become a tragic hero because they have what we call a hamartia, or a blindness, or a fatal flaw. In Othello's situation, he is blind towards Iago's deceit. So what I want you to kind of notice is that although I'm not talking about these ideas theme by theme, there are themes coming out, right? So for example, looking at like race. I suppose that's a theme, like race relations. When I'm talking about the fact that Othello has this fatal flaw, that's deception, or he's unable to distinguish illusion from reality. So illusion being Iago's lying and, oh, I'm so honest, I'm here to help you, and I've got your back, versus the reality of the fact that he is the villain, the Machiavellian so and so. So then Othello is obviously blinded. He then has an absolutely tragic downfall where in this situation, he obviously murders his wife thinking that she's cheated on him. And then the horrific truth comes to light. And the horror of it is very, very specific for Aristotle's theory, because it's almost like the flaw doesn't match the outcome. The flaw is just, oh, whoopsie, this person deceived me and I got misled, which could happen to us all. If something appears to be a certain way, it's a totally human condition to think it is that way. We are trusting by nature until we, obviously potentially deceived. But what happens here is that Othello has that trust, but then the outcome of it is just so horrendous that it almost doesn't match what his flaw was, which again was very human. So there's this sense of like pity we have for him, and this is where if you've ever heard of the term catharsis, there's like a catharsis at the end where we have this pity and this fear of our own blindness and our own flaws. Look, I wouldn't say an audience in Elizabethan context would feel sorry for him, probably because of the racial stereotypes of the time where, really he shouldn't have been, what's he doing marrying this white woman and, thinking that he's an equal in society. Like, what is that? Not acceptable back then. But then if we're looking at it from a modern perspective, I would certainly say that there's like a sense of empathy. We do feel really bad for him because, he's been a victim of the racial stereotypes of his era, and that has led to his downfall. So anyway, that theory is there. You can have a quick look at that, but I've given you an overview, and then let's now hop into what you're going to kind of cover in a 3-part essay structure for this one, and I'll continue that in the next video.